With a clipboard in hand, I entered the small, dimly lit examination room, my heart beating slightly faster than usual. Although it was not my initial experience assisting with a patient's examination, there was something about this particular assignment that caused me to feel slightly uneasy. Mr. Warren's situation was unexpected, despite my extensive experience as a nurse at a bustling downtown clinic. In his early 50s, he was a reserved individual who maintained his privacy. He underwent routine cardiac and blood pressure assessments. There was nothing unusual about this. I had previously provided him with assistance. However, the moment I entered the room, I sensed a distinct sense of difference. He was already sitting up on the bed, his posture rigid and uncertain. He squirmed uncomfortably under the paper-thin hospital gown as his eyes darted around the room. I greeted Mr. Warren with a gentle smile as I entered the room. "Good afternoon. Are you feeling well today?" He swiftly nodded, but I could discern the unease that was concealed behind his eyes. "There was an issue. I will assist you in preparing for the examination," I stated, approaching him to adjust the monitoring equipment and arrange his gown. However, as I moved, I observed an unexpected phenomenon through the thin fabric. The unmistakable shape beneath the folds of the gown caught my gaze, causing me to involuntarily lower it. I experienced a brief moment of paralysis. Afterward, my face flushed, and I immediately turned my gaze away, reminding myself to maintain a professional demeanor. I was employed as a nurse. I had received instruction regarding embarrassing circumstances. Occasionally, incidents such as this occur. It was merely anatomy. Nevertheless, the abrupt and unexpected manner in which it manifested itself left a greater impact on me than I had anticipated. I cleared my throat and reached back to modify the sheet, saying, "Let's proceed with positioning you for the doctor." But as I moved, he shifted again, this time too rapidly. The gown's edging detached entirely. Everything was revealed. I instinctively turned my head, gasping, in an effort to regain my composure. 1,000 thoughts were racing through my consciousness. Should I address it? Can you vacate the room? Assume that nothing occurred. The door squeaked open behind me before I could make a decision. "Oh, I apologize. I did not intend to interrupt." The voice of another nurse rang out, and she poked her head inside. She briefly blinked, evidently recognizing that something was amiss, and then swiftly retreated, drawing the door shut once more. I returned to Mr. Warren, who was now visibly embarrassed. He made a hasty attempt to conceal himself, but the tension continued to linger in the air. He avoided eye contact and gazed downward at his lap, his face reddened. He murmured, "I am truly apologetic about that." I exhaled, attempting to regain control. "It is acceptable. I suggest that we prepare you for your examination." I abruptly felt his hand graze against mine as I turned to retrieve new linens and supplies. Once more I was paralyzed by cold. It was light, almost unintentional, but the way it lingered caused me to query whether it was a genuine mistake or an unspoken signal. I stood completely still, uncertain about how to respond, as my skin prickled. My professional inclination advised me to disregard the situation and proceed, but my gut cautioned me to exercise caution. Just then, the door reopened. This time it was Dr. Anders, who was utterly unaware of the events that had just occurred. "Is everything in order here?" he inquired with a cheerful demeanor, perusing the patient chart as he entered. "Indeed, physician." As I stepped aside, I swiftly replied, "Mr. Warren is prepared." I did not retrace my steps. I required to exit the room. I discreetly exited as the doctor began to ask his routine questions, my pulse still racing. The door clicked shut behind me, but the discomfort persisted. Later that afternoon, as I was conducting my routine circuits and reviewing the latest chart updates, my phone vibrated with a message from the front desk. "Nurse Jenna has been requested by Mr. Warren for the follow-up appointment scheduled for tomorrow." I gazed at the message, feeling my innards contort. What is my motivation? Had I committed an error? Was it solely due to the fact that I had observed an object that was not intended for me? Or had something more profound begun to emerge? The following day arrived more rapidly than I had anticipated. I once again found myself standing in front of Mr. Warren's room, taking a deep inhale before knocking. I instructed myself to maintain a composed, professional, and detached demeanor. However, the unease was immediately reintroduced when the door opened and our gazes met. He smiled this time, but it was not the same timid, embarrassed expression as the day before. It was distinct, more self-assured, and under control. He spoke gently. "I have been contemplating you." I suppressed a slight chuckle as my heart skipped a beat. I firmly stated, "Let us concentrate on your checkup, Mr. Warren," in an effort to maintain the momentum of the conversation. However, my thoughts continued to swirl as I advanced toward his shoulders. There was an issue with this location. Deep within me, I harbored the disquieting suspicion that this was only the beginning. I entered the clinic the following morning with the intention of maintaining my distance. I had been disturbed by the events of the previous day. I repeatedly reminded myself that I was overthinking the situation and that Mr. Warren may have been simply uncomfortable and embarrassed, and that I was allowing it to affect my mental state. However, I subsequently recalled his request. He had explicitly requested my presence once more. Additionally, that smile was not a product of my imagination. I was occupied with the morning vitals and documentation for other patients. However, at approximately 10 a.m., the front desk contacted me once more to inform me that Mr. Warren was prepared to enter exam room 3. He has specifically requested your assistance. My innards tipped over. I seized my chart and aimed to align my shoulders. This time, I would ensure that no detail was left feeling uncertain. If necessary, I would be forthright, but I would also be distant. Please persevere. Mr. Warren was once more attired in a hospital gown and was seated erect when I entered the room. He appeared excessively relaxed. His expression was unintelligible, and his hands were folded in his lap. "Greetings." I offered him a cordial greeting, endeavoring to maintain a lively conversation. "Let us ensure that you are adequately prepared." He beamed at me once more, his eyes still brimming with that unsettling confidence. "I am pleased that you are the one." I hesitated. "Today, let us concentrate on your well-being." He refrained from uttering any further words as I approached, instead adjusting his tubing and verifying the monitor. I was cautious not to remain stationary, and I maintained a clinical demeanor in my movements. However, as I leaned slightly to adjust the tourniquet on his arm, he spoke softly, almost conspiratorially. "I have been reflecting on you." I tightened my mandible. "I am present to provide you with care, Mr. Warren, and I am not here to engage in personal discourse." He did not exhibit any significant reaction. Rather, he simply beamed, as if he had anticipated the response. His eyes were fixated on my movements with a disconcerting intensity. The door abruptly swung open. I was so relieved to see that someone else had entered that I nearly leaped. However, my relief was fleeting. It was not the physician. A woman in her mid-40s with pointed features, who was well-dressed but not in scrubs. She entered the room with a deliberate intent, her eyes examining the surroundings. Her gaze fixed on me before transitioning to Mr. Warren. Her voice was composed, yet it was tense. "Is there an activity that I am disrupting?" Mr. Warren's expression was slightly hesitant. "No, not at all." My heart was thumping as I stood up. I was in the process of concluding. "I will refrain from interfering with you two." Before she could respond, I slid past her and exited the hallway. I abruptly exhaled as the door closed behind me. The woman's visage, her controlled tone, and her piercing eyes were still vivid in my mind. That was his wife. I did not require confirmation to ascertain it. Additionally, she was aware of, or at least harbored, some suspicions. I attempted to banish the encounter from my mind upon returning to the nurse's station. However, I was unable to shake the image of the expression she gave me, as if she had observed something in that room that she was not supposed to. I was uncertain as to whether I had escaped from a hazardous or humiliating situation. I was in the process of organizing files when another message arrived later that afternoon. "Mr. Warren has requested your assistance for the follow-up exam tomorrow. Stunned, I gazed at the screen. I was compelled to cease this. I approached Dana, the lead nurse, and inquired whether it would be possible to designate another individual to care for Mr. Warren the following day. I said with caution, he appears to be excessively at ease. I would appreciate some additional capacity. Dana expressed her dissatisfaction. We are somewhat understaffed tomorrow. However, I will determine what I can do. I did not experience any sense of security. The subsequent day arrived at a speedier pace than I had anticipated. I reviewed the manifest. Warren's name was still adjacent to mine. I exhaled deeply and readied myself. I was not merely entering as a nurse this time. I was approaching with boundaries in mind. I was prepared to clarify those points. He was already waiting when I entered the room. On this occasion, the atmosphere was distinct. He was not grinning. He was not at ease. He was clenching his hands on his lap and gazing out the window. He said quietly, I wanted to talk to you, without turning around. I did not proceed beyond the threshold of the entryway. Regarding what? He gradually turned his head to meet my gaze. Regarding the preceding events. I remained in my current position, maintaining a controlled tone of voice. I am present to provide you with the necessary support, Mr. Warren. If there is anything else you wish to discuss, it should be with the administration. He steadily shook his head. Pretending is unnecessary. I am aware that you experienced the same sensation. I experienced a shiver down my spine. I believe you have misunderstood, I stated with conviction. The events that you believe occurred did not occur. He leaned slightly forward. You did not walk away on the initial occasion. Just then, the door squeaked open once more. It was not the physician. She was his bride. She discreetly entered the room, her gaze immediately sweeping across the room, first settling on me and then on him. What is the situation? She inquired in a composed manner. I retreated. I was in the process of departing. Her gaze, which was as keen as glass, followed me as I walked past her and out the door. In the corridor. Upon realizing that I had been retaining my breath, I exhaled. I had a terrible feeling that this wasn't over, and something was profoundly wrong. I felt as though I was traversing through a fog for the remainder of that shift. I tensed every time I passed the hallway near exam room 3, anticipating the reappearance of Mr. Warren or, at the very least, his wife. I attempted to conceal the disquiet that was simmering just beneath the surface by maintaining my head down and concentrating on patient check-ins, vitals, and charts. However, I was consumed by the manner in which he gazed at me, the words he had spoken, and the eerie silence in his wife's voice when she entered the room and inquired about the situation. It was not beneficial that I consistently received the same notification on my work tablet informing me that Mr. Warren has requested your assistance for his subsequent appointment. It was akin to a shadow that I was unable to expel. I was fatigued by the conclusion of the day. I exited the building and proceeded to the staff exit, anxious to experience the fresh air. However, as I approached the corner, I beheld him. Mr. Warren was awaiting, his coat affixed, by the double doors. In mid-step, I became frozen. I simply wanted to converse, he stated, his voice becoming more casual and lowered, as if we were two friends convening after work. I cast my eyes about. Despite the fact that a few nurses were still passing by the nurses' station, no one appeared to be paying attention. Mr. Warren, this is not appropriate. He approached. You are not required to be apprehensive of me. I am not apprehensive. I embellished the truth. Nevertheless, I am uneasy. You have violated a boundary. A voice called out from behind me before I could turn to depart. Jenna. Mark was a member of the junior personnel in the radiology department. He was beaming and waving. I instinctively returned to him, appreciative of the diversion. Mr. Warren had already retreated, his expression imperceptible, by the time I turned around again. He then murmured another time. I departed without exchanging a single word. I informed Dana once more the following day that I required an alternative individual to assume responsibility for Mr. Warren's care. She assured me that she would investigate her options. However, I was skeptical due to our inadequate staffing. I endeavored to regain a sense of normalcy by filling in wherever I could, avoiding his hallway entirely. I received a message on my tablet during a brief break in the staff room that afternoon. Nurse Jenna is being requested by patient Warren.
Urgent.
My innards lurched. I nearly erased it. It was nearly disregarded. However, I refrained from doing so. Rather, I retrieved my credential, arranged my scrubs, and returned to room 3. I was prepared to terminate it promptly if he attempted to execute any further actions. I anticipated that he would commence speaking immediately upon my arrival in the room. He refrained from doing so. Mr. Warren's expression was more grave than it had been previously, as he sat on the side of the bed and gazed out the window once more. He said, "I need to speak with you," without giving me a glance. I maintained a neutral demeanor. "In relation to your care?"
False.
"What transpired?" I maintained my proximity to the entrance. "Mr. Warren, I have already provided an explanation." He abruptly interrupted me. "Do you believe that you are the only individual who is perplexed?" I breathed. I was taken off surprise. He slowly rose to his feet and stated, "I do not wish to engage in games. However, it is impossible to deny that there is something present. You have not disclosed this information to any individual. That is significant. This implies that I am endeavoring to maintain a professional demeanor." I erupted. He approached me, but I maintained my position. Subsequently, in an instant, he grasped my wrist. "Do not," I said, promptly withdrawing my arm. He offered a fleeting smile. "Are you certain that you will not disclose this information to anyone? Because you are aware of the final appearance." That was the moment when the door creaked once more. His wife was situated just outside, partially in the shadow. She had been present for an extended period of time, which permitted her to hear something. Her demeanor was icy and unintelligible. She did not speak. She merely gazed. Without a second glance at either of them, I swiftly retreated from the room. The intensity of my heartbeat was so intense that it caused me physical discomfort. I was unaware of the information that Mrs. Warren had acquired. I was unaware of her beliefs. However, I was aware that something had occurred. Mrs. Warren was waiting at the front desk when I spotted her again later that evening, just as I was about to depart the clinic for the last time. She curtly stated, "I require a word," with a direct yet subdued voice. I hesitated, but I nodded. She escorted me to a small, overused office located down the hall. She turned to me with her arms crossed as soon as the door closed. "I am aware of the activities you have been engaging in with my spouse." My spirit plummeted. "No, madam, it is not as you perceive it. Do not deceive." She lost her temper. "I have observed his gaze upon you, and your response." I stated that I have not committed any indecent acts, attempting to maintain my composure. She stated coldly, "You are not the first, but you have the potential to be the last." The air was weighty around me as she left, and I stood there alone. The boundaries were ambiguous, the regulations had been altered, and whatever this was, it was not yet concluded. The subsequent days transpired in a flurry of caution and tension. I remained in the clinic's far wings and refrained from entering exam room 3. I even altered my break schedule in order to maintain a safe distance from both Mr. Warren and his wife. However, the weight of what had transpired never dissipated. Her warning resonated in my mind like a ticking timepiece. Nevertheless, I was unprepared for the subsequent events. It was late in the evening, and the majority of the personnel had already departed. I was completing documentation at the nurse's station when I observed Mr. Warren standing alone at the end of the hall, waiting. My respiration was temporarily interrupted. He was no longer intended to be present. His examinations had concluded. Therefore, what was the reason for his persistence? In preparation for my departure through the rear exit, I rose from my seat. However, as I rounded the corner, he advanced. He addressed Jenna with a subdued, almost exhausted voice. "I require conversation. I believe that we have sufficiently addressed the matter." I responded promptly, in an effort to surpass him. However, he gently obstructed my progress, not in an aggressive manner, but just enough to compel me to attend. "Did she converse with you?" he inquired. I maintained an upright posture as I nodded. "Indeed, she did. I believe it is in our best interest to halt the current situation before it escalates." However, rather than retreating, he smiled, his expression slow and disconcerting. "She is unaware of the majority of the information." That was the moment when I once again felt the tension and peril. He reached out and seized my wrist before I could react. "Release me." I yanked myself free, snapping. "This constitutes harassment," he stated calmly. "You are not going to report me, as you are aware of the outcome." "Your word against mine." I opened my mouth to respond, but I refrained due to the presence of his wife, who was standing behind him, just outside the hallway shadows. She had heard everything. The hallway abruptly became deserted and chilly. The realization that I was observing over his shoulder caused Mr. Warren to freeze. He made a gradual pivot. "Mrs. Warren maintained an expressionless expression as she stood with her arms folded. However, her eyes were calculating and acute. She inquired, her tone exceedingly tranquil, "Is everything in order here?" I reflexively reclined. I was in the process of departing. I proceeded past both of them without speaking a word and hastened toward the exit. However, my pulse continued to beat uncontrollably. Had she acquired sufficient information to confront him? Would she confront me once more? I was unwilling to ascertain the truth. I believed that would conclude the matter. However, as I approached the clinic's exit, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I swiveled, prepared to respond. It was she. "Mrs. Warren," she said gently. "Please wait." I gazed at her, uncertain as to whether to flee or remain silent. However, there was something about her demeanor that caused me to pause. She continued, gesturing toward an unoccupied consultation room in the vicinity. "We must converse." I pursued her, albeit reluctantly. She closed the door and turned to face me, her expression inscrutable. After entering, she stated, "I have observed his gaze upon you. I am aware of his capabilities." My mouth became parched. "Then, what is the reason?" She stated with firmness, "I am not present to issue you any threats. I am present to provide assistance." "What is the matter?" She continued, "I am not the woman you believe me to be. Tom, my spouse, has a darker side. He is particularly adept at manipulating women. I have observed him perform this action previously. I have permitted it to remain unresolved until now." I maintained my silence. She presented me with a folder that she had extracted from her purse. Messages, documents, and photographs were contained within, evoking an image of an individual I had never anticipated. For years, she stated, he's been engaging in this activity. Not only nurses, colleagues, and neighbors, but also a family friend. Flipping through the contents caused my hands to tremor. "You see," she stated, her voice abruptly returning to a state of tranquility.
"This is not solely about you or me.
It is a matter of control. He will not cease until someone compels him to do so." I raised my head. "Why are you disclosing this information to me?" She reached back into her bag and extracted a diminutive silver key. "I am seeking your assistance in exposing him." "What is the matter?" She stated that you have already placed one foot in the flames. Therefore, what is the harm in intentionally destroying it? The room was faintly spinning, and I experienced a sensation of dizziness. Was she being sincere? Was this a ruse? Or was she genuinely finished embodying the ideal wife? She opened the door before I could respond. She stated, "Consider it," as she exited the room. "However, do not delay for an excessive amount of time. He is already devising his subsequent course of action." I was left standing there with a folder in one hand and a key in the other, ensnared in a realm that is both more profound and sinister than I could have ever imagined. I was now faced with a decision, either to leave and assume that none of this had ever occurred, or to remain and participate in the events that followed.